currently Rob Gronkowski is not very good, according to one NFL player. Who said it, and why not give you some fantasy point projections for tight ends while we're at it?
Plus, what to expect from Tiger at the Dell Technologies Championship, and some sneaky good guys to roster.
I like that. And how about in each tier of Major League Baseball, who to pay up for?
It's 60 minutes of money-making advice, and it starts right now.
All right, the sweat is here, you are there, and this show will make you feel awesome. It's not a guarantee, but I will tell you what is. She's Jessie, I'm Emerson, and our baseball panel is feeling feisty tonight.
Hello, Gary and Thorne. Hello, Greg Ehrenberg. Let's play some Chase or Fade. This is the night Justin Verlander puts up 30-plus DK fantasy points. He hasn't done it since August 3rd. So are you chasing or fading this one, Garion?
I've got to fade it. Now, I will say, in a GPP tournament play, I can see the appeal of using a guy like Verlander. He's got a 37% strikeout rate since the middle of July, but in that same span of time, he's allowing a 372 WOBA to opponents. And I also kind of look at the way Verlander has struggled to work deep into games lately, and I think that could be a problem again tonight. He's averaging 4.08 pitches per plate appearance. It's the 8th highest mark of any qualified pitcher in baseball, and the Angels for the last 2 weeks have the lowest swing rate in all of baseball. So you could definitely see some deep counts in this game, really getting that pitch count up early. So I understand it. But I think with the Angels also getting Justin Upton back tonight, I don't think Verlander's going to get there.
Greg, what about you?
Yeah, I have to agree with Garen on this one. I think at this point of the season, we're starting to see fatigue as an issue for Verlander. His last start, 94.75 average fastball velocity. In a vacuum, that seems like he's throwing pretty hard, but that's actually the slowest he's thrown since the middle of April. So if we're also looking at 25-point DraftKings average for him on the season, the Angels only strike out in 20.7% of their bats against right-handed pitching this year. I just think 30 is too high of a bar to set for Verlander. I think he's going to be under that tonight.
All right, well, Manny Machado will put up double-digit DK points for the 5th straight game tonight. What are you doing here, Garion? Chasing or fading?
I'm going to fade this one, too. I can't deny he's in a good spot against a left-handed pitcher. He's been crushing left-handed pitching all season long. The problem here, though, is Robbie Ray is on the road. I mean, once he gets outside of Chase Field, he's been a different guy in 2018. He's holding right-handed batters to a 278 WOBA on the road, and the number overall is even better. He's also still someone who has a high propensity to strike guys out, 28% strikeout rate against right-handed bats. And sort of in the same vein as Verlander, this is someone who's not going to work deep into this game. I mean, 9 of his last 10 starts, he hasn't gotten out of the 6th. And generally that's a negative, but for the season, the Diamondbacks have the best bullpen in the National League by ERA. So I don't really like how this stacks up for Machado tonight.
Dude's absolutely raking right now. The Dodgers are on a 5-game win streak. Greg, what do you think about this? You going to chase or fade that this dude's going off again?
Yeah, I'm going to chase Machado. I think that Garion is wrong here. I just don't think that Robbie Ray is that good. I understand that he's pitched better away from Chase Field this year, but he's still getting hit really hard, a 42.7% hard contact rate. Overall, he's giving up a 363 WOBA to right-handed hitters this year. And the Dodgers, I do think this is the best offense in the National League, and they're starting to come together right now. Machado has scored at least 14 DK points in 4 consecutive games. I think that the Dodgers are going to be really good to close out the year, and I'm chasing Machado here.
All right, there's not an obvious go-to stack tonight. Are you chasing or fading this one, Greg?
So I do think that there is an obvious go-to stack tonight, and that's the Yankees at home against Francisco Liriano. Liriano has also just been awful this year. The last time that he pitched 6 innings was July 4th. And the reason he comes out of games early is because he's just always getting his ass kicked. If you look at his DK scoring this year, it's been over a month since he scored at least 10 fantasy points. And if you look at the odds on sportsbook.draftkings.com, the Yankees are the largest favorite on the slate. And there's good reason for that. They should really do damage against Liriano this season.
Yeah, Garion, they've got a 5.6 run projection. Is that enough to make you want to stack them?
Yeah, I think Greg's right on the money here. I mean, the Yankees are not only are they the obvious play, but it's almost strange in the way that they've been demolished by injuries. that kind of opens up some premium lineup spots to be somewhat affordable tonight. I mean, usually the problem with trying to stack the Yankees and them being the most obvious stacking opportunity is how are you going to get $4,000 or $5,000 bats into your lineup? And that's not saying that Stanton's not expensive. Aaron Hicks is still very expensive, but Luke Voigt's 3.9 in batting cleanup tonight. Like, there are ways to get your 2-3 player mini stacks for the Yankees out there. And there might even still be people who think Lucas Giolito is the worst pitcher on the planet. And I'm not saying he's good, but he's not April Lucas Giolito, and some of this ownership might find its way to the Red Sox, and that means good things for maybe some differentiation on this stack.
Yeah, and just to add one more thing to what Garen said, if we both agree that we don't think Verlander is going to score all that well, we're not really looking at too many expensive pitching options tonight. So the Yankees offense, which isn't uber expensive, and if we like them to score a lot, they're pretty easy to fit in with whatever pitchers we like.
Yeah, again, Justin Verlander is going to cost you $12K tonight, so you roster that, you got to figure out the rest. That'll do it for now, guys. We'll see you here in just a few moments. Still ahead, though, we got some of the guys who could return fantastic value this weekend at the Dell Technologies Championship, so hang tight.
Tyler Sullivan here with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. A year ago, Justin Thomas was able to lock up the Dell Technologies Championship. Now he's back looking to climb back atop the mountain at TPC Boston beginning on Friday. Thomas prices in at $11,400 for the contest, which puts him second, only behind world number 1 Dustin Johnson, and comes into this one on a pretty hot streak. Thomas enters TPC Boston with 3 straight top 10 finishes, which includes a Bridgestone Invitational win, and averages out of that contest 101.5 DK points per average in those trio of contests. In this championship run in 2017, Thomas had a pretty balanced attack and was able to gain strokes off the tee, putting, and around the green. Given that history in this course and his recent success rolling into TP.
Two best friends that anybody can have. Reed Fowler, Jeff Ulrich. Jeff, we have missed you.
Yeah,
it's been
we
a
really
while.
have. You guys are in your matching outfits. Thank you so much for that.
You guys too? I don't have friends, Emerson. Sorry, man.
Yeah, love that. All right, guys, well, we want you to give us 2 guys who are priced under $7,500 with upside. So, Jeff, please give us just your first pick.
Just my first pick. Okay, I'll go with Kevin Kisner for my first pick. I assume most of the world will be off Kevin Kisner this week, seeing as he shot about 82 twice last weekend. But look, if you look past last weekend, I mean, he was 12th at the PGA Championship. He was in contention at the Open Championship, and he was doing everything well. So I just don't see the reason to get off him here. He was T12 at TPC Boston on his first appearance. He's made the cut here three straight years. I think this is a much better venue for Kevin Kisner, and I think this is a great week to get on him in big GPPs because no one's going to own him.
All right, Reed, give us your pick.
Yeah, mine's Benny On at 7,000, right at that 7K flat. Benny On has gained 25 strokes, I believe, in the last 6 tournaments tee to green, but he's lost about 16 putting. This guy ended up 40th last time, but his putting is never really his strong suit. But over the last 2 tournaments, he's lost 16 strokes. So if this guy just comes back to normal just a little bit, his tee to green game is strong. He's been hitting his irons really well. With the fast surfaces that we're going to see at TPC Boston, hopefully some of these guys get back into form with putting, because that's the thing that can switch. We've been harking on it all season. Take the elite ball strikers. Benny On's been hitting it really well with the irons. It's just that putting. So if that flips, then Benny On will be good value.
Reedy, what about your second pick? Another bargain bro under $7,500.
Yeah, it's one of the old guys, Stuart Sink. Stuart Sink is right there, I believe, at 7,100. He's another guy that's been playing extremely well. I mean, over the since June, he's got a couple of top 25s, a couple of top 5s, and a second place. And this guy is playing extremely well. He missed the cut last week, so his price, obviously, with the harder field, would be depressed, and his ownership is going to get you around that 10%. So you're going to pay up on ownership a little bit, but at $7,100, this guy is hitting the ball, again, elite ball striker in the last 24 rounds. Give me Sink.
Elite ball striker putts worse than me.
And that's saying something.
That really is.
Who's your second pick, Jeff?
I'm going with Rafa Cabrera-Bello, and I mean, this guy's just a class play. I mean, he's the class of the low 7K range, in my opinion. Another player who did take out last week, Rafa Cabrera-Bello was playing really, really good golf, in contention at the PGA Championship. He's just a good all-around player, and he's T18 at this venue last season on his debut. I mean, look, Stuart Sink, Benny On, yeah, they could have good putting weeks. It could come out of nowhere, but Rafa Cabrera-Bello is a player who does everything well. this venue is a little bit more suited to scoring than last week. I think a guy like Kisner, a guy like Rafa Cabrera-Bello, who can get hot with the putter, not just like once every 2 years like Stuart Sink. He actually can putt well. I'd much rather go with him than Sink.
Reed, you made this.
He was positive putting in strokes gained, and he came in 60th last week. So yeah, okay, I'll take a guy who's positive putting and still came in 60th.
Is still 70 spots higher than Stuart Sink finished last week.
Yeah,
so.
Reed, you kind of looked like you were caught off guard a little bit when he dropped Cabrera-Bello on you there.
Well, Cabrera-Bello, he's a fine play. We see him hit in these WGC type events, right? This is not a WGC event. He plays well against strong field. It's just look, we were on him a couple weeks ago, and what did he do? He absolutely burned everyone. So I'm not on RCB. I think if you want to pivot off of some of these higher owned guys, like Sink will be, or potentially Benny On at 9-10% in that 7K range, I think it's fine. But I just rather take the guys who are hitting the ball well and could potentially get a good putting week.
All right, thanks, guys. We're going to get you back here in just a little bit to get your slate-approved picks.
But for now, to football we go. Football. Talking soccer with RotoWire's Jordan Cooper and DK's Len Don Diego. Happy belated birthday, Len.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, big birthday. All right, Jordan. Sergio Aguero, did I say that right? We'll see. From Manchester City is the top priced player on the slate. He's also only forward eligible. Is he the best bet up front? And if he's not, who would you go with?
Well, for 11,100, I know he's the highest priced player on the slate, and rightfully so. Manchester City are a minus 850 favorite, prohibitive at home against Newcastle. The past 4 games Aguero has faced Newcastle, he's scored a total of 9 goals, which includes a hat trick last time out and a game where he scored 5. So I think plugging in the Aguero in your forward spot, I see people may want to go to Hazard in a good matchup, Chelsea against Bournemouth, and it's going to be pretty hard to build a lineup with both of them in it. So if you had to choose one, I'll rely on the goal from Aguero in a game that Manchester City should win 4-5-0.
All right, well, let's see. Len, do you agree? Do you think that he is the best bet up front? Don't think we have Len at the moment.
We don't have Len, but
we'll just move on to our next question. We'll save that one later for Len.
All right, Jordan, there's lots of options in midfield between the ranges of $9,500 and $10,500. Who are you leaning towards right now?
Well, in that range, I think you're going to have an issue if you play Aguero. You may want to pair him with another Manchester City player. The problem is that they are the late game, and with Pep Guardiola always rotating the starting 11, you may not know who's in. So I think the safest bet is to look down in the 5K range, where you have multiple players like Robert Snodgrass, Joe Matinho, Aaron Moy, Luka Milivojevic. They're all the set piece type, floor type of players. But out of that bunch, I prefer John Michael Sari, 5,200 for Fulham. I know Fulham are going away to Brighton, but I'm not that scared of him, of Brighton especially. And with Tom Kearney being out for Fulham most likely, Sari is going to have a little bit more attacking responsibility. So you combine that plus his near monopoly on set pieces, I think it's a safe bet for 5,200 to get a good 8 to 10 points.
Len joining us now, late to the party, but always good to have him here at the party. Lots of options in the midfield between $9,500 and $10,500. Who are you leaning towards here, dude?
Yeah, I like the Aaron Moy choice I heard mentioned. I'm looking at Ruben Neves for Wolves. I think Wolves are in a really good matchup. He's had multiple shots in each game so far this season, so he's definitely someone you can target. And then Elonesi for Southampton had a ridiculous, 10 crosses last week. He's someone who's going to be on the ball a ton. So I think there are options, and I think that's the way to construct a lineup, especially if you're going to Aguero at the top.
Yeah, so I was just about to follow up with that one. So do you think Aguero is the top price player? We know he's the top price player, but do you think he's the best bet up front, or would you go with somebody else?
Yeah, look, I mean, if the question is Aguero's the most likely to score, he's the most likely to score multiple times on this slate. You can look to Wolves for some cheaper forward options. I think, it's hard to go away from him. Raul Jimenez could be interesting if you're stacking Wolves and going away from Manchester City, but I think Sergio Aguero is the top option. The offense has been flowing through him. He's the favorite to score multiple goals.
All right, well, Jordan, talk defense to me. Who's going to get you the most bang for your buck?
Well, I'm going back to the well. Manchester City are going to pound Newcastle. So I know he's the highest priced defender, but there really isn't any other defender that has as high of a floor as he does, and that's Benjamin Mendy, 7,300 for Manchester City. DeAndre Yedlin, who's going to be playing for Newcastle on that side. Mendy must be twice his size, and Mendy's going to just be marauding that flank all game. He almost plays as a winger, nearly gets forward at every opportunity for Manchester City. So in addition to the 3-point clean sheet bonus, I see 8+ crosses, and especially if you're playing Aguero, I mean, Mendy's crosses is probably going to end up on the foot or the head of Aguero. So getting that goal assist combo on one play is a great bet for that game.
Len, who's going to give you the most value on defense in your opinion? I think Len is frozen. So,
Toodaloo, Len. It was
Len.
great having
Great to
you,
have
and
you
you
here.
look fantastic
Yeah.
in glasses. Jordan, since we still have you, which keeper is in the best spot?
Well, I think I froze Len because, keeper,
Your
coming
hot
up to
takes,
that
baby.
question.
They're great.
Everyone knows that keeper is the highest variance position in DraftKings soccer. So you go down, look for the shots, go up, look for the win and the clean sheet. Obviously, Ederson for Man City is going to have the highest win and clean sheet equity. But right underneath him for 200 less at 5,800 is Kepa for Chelsea. And I think he may be the better option, only because in the Man City Newcastle game, I'm not sure how many shots Ederson is even going to face. In the Chelsea game, Bournemouth have no problem pushing the attack, even on the road. They'll probably be down. They'll probably have to take a bunch of long shots. So I think for 5,800, Kepa for Chelsea has good win and clean sheet equity, as well as the ability to generate 3 or 4 saves to put up a nice 16 to 20 point score.
All right, Jordan. Yeah, thank you for the insight.
Thank you for having an internet that works as well, Jordan.
We appreciate that.
a lot.
You look great. All right, well, we're done with European football talk for the day, but our NFL panel will be here in just a couple minutes to talk tight ends.
Tyler Sullivan here with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. Aaron Rodgers may have been the one who got paid by the Green Bay Packers, inking that mega $134 million extension, but it's tight end Jimmy Graham that fantasy owners are hoping hits pay dirt during the 2018 season. Now that Rodgers' contract is out of the way, it seems like it's smooth sailing for the Packers offense, who look a little bit different this year with the subtraction of Jordy Nelson and the addition of Graham. Nelson was a great red zone target for Rodgers during their time together, but now that could fall on the shoulders of Graham. So far this preseason, Graham has been quiet, catching only one pass, which turned into an 8-yard touchdown, but he does have the potential to produce at a high level with Rodgers throwing him the football. While he's hardly the same player that he was with the Saints way back when, Graham was able to notch double-digit touchdowns while ranking 7th in average points per game among tight ends with Seattle last season. There's also been some rumblings of a potential Randall Cobb trade by the Packers, which would open up even more targets for Graham, making him a solid option in season long and on the DFS circuit.
All right, guys, going back to baseball, we got a DK fantasy alert for you. It looks like Shohei Ohtani, for the first time in what feels like a bajillion years, will be pitching once again on Sunday. This was a guy, this is confirmed, by the way, by manager Mike Scioscia, a guy who many expected he was going to have Tommy John surgery. Not the case. He's back on the mound Sunday. Let's bring in Garion and Greg once again, our baseball guys. Let's get some reaction from you real quick. Greg, what do you expect his fantasy value to be? It's going to be the first time we've seen him in quite a while.
Yeah, well, obviously it's a few days out, so we don't know what his pricing is going to be. But one concern I would definitely have with Ohtani is how many pitchers are they going to let him throw? We know that how he's a huge part of the Angels' future and how much money they've invested in him. He hasn't started in how many, 3 months now? So I expect that he's going to have a pitch count, and then it's also going to be a really tough matchup. He's playing against the Astros that night, Garrett Cole on the other side of the mound. So he's probably not going to be a great DFS play the first time out, but you hope that he looks good, the velocity's there, and then we see the pitch count start to come up as we get deeper into the season. And then maybe if he looks good in that start, it's something where 2-3 starts from now, we'd want to roster him.
Yeah, Gary, you just heard what Greg had to say. We don't really know what to expect on a pitch count. Don't know his price right now. So is he going to be someone you think you're going to take a shot on here, or is it going to be a wait-and-see situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the boring answer, but I think you have to play wait and see. We've seen this time and time again with, I mean, even if you want to put Ohtani in the elite class of pitcher, and for DFS he might be considering his high strikeout upside, but this season I think the only guy who comes to mind who really performed coming directly off the DL or a prolonged absence from starting was James Paxton, and that's like one of 8, 9, 10 examples we've had this season. So if a pitch count is involved, I just feel like you're going to have to steer clear from him regardless of what the price is.
All right, well, now that we got that breaking news out of the way, Garion, we're going to play Thorn in My Side. So give the people at home 3 guys you hate, 3 guys you are fading, and we'll see how Greg feels about them.
Well, I mentioned this a little bit in the last segment we were talking Yankees, but Boston seems on paper like they would have a very favorable matchup tonight, and they do. The run projection is high in this game for the Red Sox. But Lucas Giolito has been a bit of a different pitcher the last month and a half or so. Over his last 9 starts, just allowing a 274 WOBA to left-handed bats. And those were the handedness splits that were killing him throughout April, May, and June. And I feel like some people are still going to kind of cling to that, especially with Jackie Bradley Jr. having one of his, I don't know, like what, two-week stretches he tends to have every season where he's hot. Does have a 370 WOBA in the month of August, but he has been putrid once leaving Fenway Park. Just a 67 WRC plus on the road against right-handed pitching so far this season. So I think for anyone out there who's looking to stack together Boston left-handed bats, I might steer clear of the $4,000 player who's hitting 9th tonight and really isn't very good in general.
Greg, what do you think? Jackie Bradley Jr., he's been on a hot streak. Do you think it's going to continue?
Yeah, well, I hate to have to agree with Garen as Jackie Bradley being a fade, especially because that's not the point of what this segment is supposed to be. I'll say that his next 2 picks, I'll probably jump on a little bit for those being crappy fades. But for Jackie Bradley, I'm going to have to agree with him. It's more than I want to pay for a number 9 hitter. He only has 11 homers this year, so it's not really a ton of upside in him. And Giolito is starting to pitch better. I'd put a poll up on my Twitter like a month ago, is Giolito the worst pitcher in baseball? And most people agreed that he was the worst pitcher in baseball at the time, and he's been much better since then. A big part of it is he's throwing more strikes now. He's striking more guys out where he wasn't able to get the ball over the plate to start the season. I'd be more interested to see Garen. I know you say you want to fade Jackie Bradley, but I don't think he's going to be somebody who's all that popular. Would you be willing to say that Andrew Benintendi is also a fade?
The interesting thing with Benintendi, and I don't know if I'm necessarily targeting him, but he does hit the changeup so exceedingly well. I believe he's, by Fangraphs metrics, the best changeup hitter in baseball. It makes me somewhat hesitant to fade him completely against Giolito, but at the same time, if I am stacking Yankees, I'm probably just not going to be able to afford him. So, yeah, I guess in a roundabout way, I am also fading Benintendi.
Well, you guys are in agreement about your first Thorn. What about your second?
Tyler White. Tyler White, red hot right now. You hit a walk-off home run. I guess you get a little bit of notoriety hitting 5th tonight. So, again, premium lineup spot for the Astros. And in general, crushes left-handed pitching. A 197 WRC plus against lefties. But Andrew Heaney's an interesting case tonight because if you look deeper into Tyler White's numbers, pitch specific, he has done all his damage. 9 of his 10 home runs this season have come off four-seam fastballs and sliders. Andrew Heaney doesn't throw either of those pitches. He is strictly 2 right-handed batters, a sinker curveball pitcher. Tyler White has yet to hit an extra base hit off a curveball this season, and he's only got a 120 isolated power against sinkers this season. So while this does seem like a good spot on paper, and while I do believe the Astros are going to score some runs tonight, I don't think White would be part of my Astros stats.
All right, Greg, what do you think about Tyler White?
Yeah, so here, I'm not going to look too much into it like Garen did. I'm just going to make this very simple. Tyler White is hitting the ball really well right now. He's hitting a lot of home runs. And then in addition to that, I think he's 458 WOBA against left-handed pitching this year. He hits lefties really well. Andrew Heaney struggled a little bit recently. So I think that we put those things together, and this should be a good game for Tyler White. I'm not going to make this too complicated and say he doesn't hit changeups well, he doesn't hit sliders well. I forget what the number was that Garion said. He hits lefties well, and I think that's what's more important. I think it's going to be a good night for the Astros.
All right. Well, Garion, give us your final Thorn. This is kind of the tiebreaker to see if you guys both agree, disagree. So this is your moment.
I'd ask for a drum roll, but it might freeze. So
yeah.
Let's not do that. Our internet's very ill today.
Yeah.
Well, Steve's not here, so that's probably helping things a little bit. But Ozzie Albies. Albies, again, it's sort of a curious case, and he, a lot like Matt Kemp, are the poster childs for this. But you look at his splits right now, it seems like he hits left-handed pitching exceedingly well. And, again, for the season he has, but it's so top-heavy with Albies, it's kind of insane. You go back to his numbers in March and April. 24 plate appearances, had a 708 isolated power and a 708 WOBA off of left-handed pitching. In the 4 months since then, he's only managed a 117 isolated power against southpaws. So even though the batting average has sustained itself, he's basically a singles hitter against left-handed pitching, and that's not something I'm willing to invest in, especially with his recent move down the order. So I think it's kind of a false flag here when you look at his numbers and say he's been crushing left-handed pitching this season.
Greg, he's 4.4. Would you pay up for him?
Yeah, well, here's the thing: is 4.4 is, I think it's kind of relative. It seems like an expensive price for a second baseman until you consider that Ozzie Albies was priced over $5,000 earlier in the year. He is a second baseman I feel has a lot of upside. So when we're talking about he should regress a little bit from the beginning of the season, he still does have a 142 WRC plus against left-handed pitching. And the other thing to consider is we're not paying the apex price for him. The price is down. I think it has room to go up. So with that said, I think that there is upside in his price tag. I do like the spot for Ozzie Albies against a pretty weak left-hand pitcher in Montgomery.
All right, guys, thanks for the time. We appreciate it. And we'll have you back on one more time, I believe, in our program.
We got some tears of joy to get to.
Going to get some slate approved. But it is 1 week from tonight. Guess what?
What's up?
NFL season kicks off. And we're talking about it right now with Rosalie Michaels and Matthew Freeman, who, by the way, you can watch on the new Action Network app available on Android and iPhone.
Very cool. I have an iPhone, so that should work out.
You do?
Yes,
nice,
I do.
Man.
Now we are focusing on season projections for some of the league's top tight ends here, guys, which includes, obviously, the newest Packer, Jimmy Graham. How accurate do you think 10 touchdown receptions is for him, Rosalie?
Well, when you look at the fact that he had 10 touchdown receptions last year with the Seahawks, that was the most in the league last year. So I think 10 touchdown receptions is very, very achievable, especially given that now he's with Green Bay. We've already seen a little bit that Aaron Rodgers to Jimmy Graham magic that's going to be happening. They had 25 total touchdowns last year with Rodgers only playing 7 games. So I think more like 12 touchdowns for Jimmy Graham this year, which is why I picked him up on 2 of my fantasy teams this year.
Yeah, that seems like it could be a nice payback for you. Matt, I want to know what you think about this too, because Rodgers refers to him as the X factor, thinks Graham's talent could actually create an offense capable of rivaling any he's been on in his time in Green Bay, including that 2011 team that averaged 35 points per game. So you thinking 10 touchdowns here for Graham, a little less, a little more?
Well, I have to go under, but I do see the possibility for the upside there because Rodgers does like to throw the ball when they're in the red zone, and he does like to pepper those guys. And Jordy Nelson, who has been his main red zone target the last 4 years, is gone. So there are a slew of targets there for him. I think the main thing though is that Graham is really starting to slow down. And last year he was targeted heavily in the red zone. And he pretty much played at his peak capacity. With that said, he still had only around like 550 receiving yards. So what you saw out of Graham last year was kind of like an aberration of touchdown to yardage total. So either he really improves as a yardage producer this year, or I think his touchdown number is going to regress because the ratio that we saw out of him last year really just is not sustainable moving forward.
Now, as for Rob Gronkowski, Jacksonville's Jalen Ramsey said today, quote, "I don't think Gronk's good." But the Patriots apparently do, restructuring his contract today, which could earn him an additional $4 million this season. Matt, 1,100 receiving yards for Gronk. How close to the mark do you think he will get?
I think it's actually pretty close. I would go a little bit under, but some of that just has to do with the unknown of will Gronk be able to stay healthy for a full season. If he misses a game or two, then I think that puts him in serious jeopardy of hitting this mark. But if he played a full season, I think this is actually pretty close to the mark.
Now, Rosalie, part of that new deal is that he receives $1.1 million if he hits 1,085 yards, pretty close to 1,100. Yeah. So do you think he's going to be able to do it?
Well, you look at it, you talk about Gronk's injuries, and yeah, that's always a thought process, but he only played 13 games last year, and hit that mark. So to me, money is the greatest motivator, right? I mean, that's it. If those incentives are there, and Gronk really is, Jalen Ramsey cracks me up because he's been going off on everybody. I feel kind of bad that I haven't been slammed by Jalen Ramsey yet. I'm waiting for the day. But yeah, I think that Gronk, if he stays healthy, as Matthew said, if he stays healthy, that's the key. If he stays healthy, yeah, I can see him going well over the 1,100 yards because he did it in only 13 games last year.
Listen, Rosalie, we'll really know we've made it when Jalen Ramsey calls us all out.
Right.
Yeah, that would be great. He's already been in trouble for that before, so we'll see what happens. Last tight end we're talking about here, guys, Travis Kelce out in Kansas City. How do you feel about a projection of 80 catches this season, Rosalie?
You know, this is the one tight end, and I love Travis Kelce, but when you look at what's happening with the new QB there, 80 receptions, he had 83 last year. So it seems like it could be pretty easy to do. But Kelsey's had a pretty quiet preseason, right? So watching what he's doing with Mahomes there, he finishes the preseason with 6 catches for 78 yards over 3 games. Not a big deal. He was that lock-on target for Alex Smith. But I don't think he's going to get as many looks with Pat Mahomes. Alex Smith didn't like to throw downfield. Mahomes does. So I'm thinking he's going to do more of that and a little bit less of the Kelce factor. So I think he's going to have about 70 catches this year.
Okay, well, he had 75 last year. New quarterback, as you mentioned, who Kelce loves, by the way, and healthy entering the year for the first time in 2 seasons. So, Matt, what are you thinking? 80-ish catches?
Yeah, I like this number quite a bit. I think it's pretty spot on. It's actually almost exactly what we have at Action Network in our projections there. And as Rosalie mentioned, you know, some of this is unknown because there's always the factor of going from Alex Smith to Patrick Mahomes. But still, it's an Andy Reid offense. Kelce basically plays as a big-bodied slot receiver in that offense, and he is a decent field stretcher for a guy of his size. So I think there is the capability for them, even if they use him in a slightly different way, for them to continue to feature him. He basically is the number 1 receiver in that offense. I expect him to continue to get targets, and I think that will translate into about 80 receptions.
All right, guys, we appreciate the time. We're going to have you back to get some grades in a little while for preseason stuff. But for now, hello once again to Reed Fowler and Jeff Ulrich, looking ahead to the Dell Technologies Championship that tees off tomorrow at TPC Boston.
All right, Reed, Bryson DeChambeau is atop the FedEx Cup standings after his win last week. So what are the chances he grabs another top 5 this week? Just $8,700, dude.
Well, I like where he's priced, and so I will say that just because he's by Hideki, Cantlay, I think Finau, so he's priced by those guys that were, I think, his ownership coming from winning the tournament last week to this week. But in terms of top 5, I'm gonna fade that. I think top 15. The one reason why is he is, and I talked about this last segment, is he's hitting his irons, he's hitting the ball great. It's just the putting. When you get him on bent and fast greens, he becomes 40th ranked in the last 24 rounds. So that scares me a little bit. I still think he gets it. Even though he did gain about 4 strokes last year at this course, I still think he gets a little bit outside of the top 10, top 15.
Jeff, a stress-free stroll for him at the Northern Trust last week. You thinking top 5 here in Boston?
Yeah, I mean, Bryson's an interesting one. I do understand the argument for getting back on him. I mean, his all-around game is definitely, one of the top in the world right now. But you think about what went into last week. He secured a Ryder Cup spot. He's first in the FedEx Cup standings. It was a big week for Bryson DeChambeau. He blew away an elite field. I don't know. I just feel like this is such a letdown spot that I just don't really want to pay up for him. I'd say, outside of the top 5, personally. It's more of a narrative thing. I get that. If you're looking at stats, obviously, he's probably still trending up towards, whatever his top baseline, whatever you want to call it. But I just don't really see him being able to bounce back emotionally necessarily to really another big finish in another elite field. And we've seen players win the first playoff event and then kind of take a little bit of a lull, sometimes come back and play well at the last playoff event. But I think Bryson's going to be in for a bit of a downswing this week. Just my opinion.
Yeah, I know you're talking about paying up for him at $8,700. Reed, we were talking earlier. You were actually shocked he was priced this low.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about this is a strong field, right? And we talk about WGCs or majors, and that's what I'm treating this like. And you see that pricing up at the top be pretty soft because of the talent that's there. coming off of a win, you would think he'd be in that 9K. And we've seen Bryson in that 9K range. Granted, there might have been lesser strength in terms of the field, but where he's priced with guys like Hideki, Finau, and Stenson, and these guys, you would think that he'd be priced a little bit higher. That's why, again, a GPP play for me with Bryson. But I agree with Jeff. It takes a lot out of someone when they win, right, to then come back and do that again. So.
All right, Tony Finau, $8,800 this week, jumping into the top 5 of the postseason standings. Jeff, will he still be there after the Dell this weekend?
This is a tough one for me. I mean, this week I think sets up pretty well for Finau. I mean, he's a good bentgrass putter. At least his strokes gained putting is better on bentgrass than it is on other surfaces. So that's a plus. He's playing well. He doesn't seem to have any of those ankle issues that were bothering him early in the season. At the same time, for him to remain in the top 5, he's going to have to fade people like Webb Simpson, Phil Mickelson, Jordan Spieth, all these really elite players behind him. Gun to my head, I'll say no, he won't be in the top 5 of the FedEx Cup standings after this week, but I do kind of like him, so I don't know.
Undecided. Jeff, what about you? How do you feel? I'm sorry, Jeff. Reed, how do you feel about Finau?
You guys do look a lot alike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're both extremely
The
handsome.
two of you.
Exactly. I agree with Jeff. This is a tough one because when you look at his finishes, he's got a missed cut, a 24th, and a 64th here, right? And so I'm going to say he finishes outside the top 5 because Jeff's right. Again, I hark on this quite a bit because I think it's going to be important. Is putting is going to be paramount here. It's not going to be the most important thing, but when you look at Finau, he is putting better, but he has to fade those like Jeff was saying. He has to fade the elite guys. He came in second, right? So if we take that narrative of what we saw in that first question with Tony Finau, that also might be something that's, that comes now. He could get some sort of fire and say, like, I got to win one because he's one of these tier 2 guys that should win. But to stay in that top 5, I think he stays in the top 10, but it'd be hard pressed for him to stay in the top 5.
All right, then there's Big Cat, guys. $9,700, dropped to 25 in the standings after a T40 at the Northern Trust last week. Tiger actually saying today out at TPC Boston he thinks he should have just skipped that tournament like a lot of other guys did. Thinking he can do enough here to crack the top 20 of the FedEx rankings, Reed?
Yeah, it's easy to say after you don't do well. I should have skipped it, right? Like, come on.
For sure. Come on, Tiger. You're better than that.
A little bit. You're better. I think he does. I think he gets actually in the top. I think he finishes in the top 10 here. Last week and this week are his best chances in terms of the course setup, how he's playing. Look, he lost 5 strokes putting in the last 3 tournaments, but he's gained 13 total. Like, he lost 5 in that last tournament, but he's gained 13 over the last 3 tournaments. And so Tiger is one of the best putters. He's top 10 in strokes gained approach, and he's really good with his long irons. And those are the key stats that I'm looking at. So yeah, I think Tiger comes inside the top 20 and finishes inside the top 10 here.
Jeff, last week feeling a tad bit disappointing, but I think that's because the previous month had been just such a thrill watching this guy. Can he do enough this week in the Dell Technologies Championship to break back into the top 20 of the standings?
Yeah, I definitely think he can. I think I might have been a bit premature last week with my Tiger prediction, but everything does seem to set up better here this week. Again, it's been more of an approach-driven course. He's got great course history here. I think some people don't realize how good it is. His putting was terrible last week. It was terrible. It just can't be any worse. So if he putts even a little bit better, he's going to finish a little bit higher. I could definitely see him getting into contention. And look, I've said I really feel like the playoffs, Tiger is going to make his mark in one of these events. So it wouldn't shock me if it was this week. I do expect a rebound of some sort. I don't know if he's going to win, but top 10. I hate to agree with Reed so much, but I think a top 10 for Tiger is a pretty good prediction.
All right, guys, time for your slate-approved picks. Your lock of the tournament, somebody we've talked about today. Jeff, who are you going with?
I'm going with Brooks Koepka. 11K, or yeah, he's like the third expensive player. He's less than Dustin Johnson, less than Justin Thomas. But look, first in strokes gained tee to green last week. He couldn't putt either. This guy's been the best player in the world over the last 2.5 months. It's the summer of Brooks. I think he gets his first playoff win here.
Reed, who are you going with?
Well, if we're going with someone that we talked about, I think Tiger is the guy. But in terms of the entire tournament, Rory is the guy for me. Great course history, strong with the driver and the approach. Putting should get a little bit better on these fast greens. So those are my 2 guys.
And Brooks can bench like 450 pounds or something ridiculous like that.
That's important too.
Yeah, you know, that's a very important stat. I'm going to go ahead and chase that one. Thanks, guys. We missed you already.
All right. Okay, see ya.
Here's Pat Mayo talking DFS NFL strategy.
You mentioned late swap. That'd be, you know, if we're playing the full slate on a Sunday, the 1 o'clock game's locked, you still have the ability to amend your lineup for the 4 o'clock game. However, how do you use this to your advantage? Because I know people talk about it who are like DraftKings professionals all the time, that they use this to a great advantage. And I'm talking about the player that might play anywhere from like 3 to 20 lineups, because I think that's the person that we're trying to help with this kind of show. I mean, that's where I fall when I create these lineups. I'm not ever playing 150. It's just not, I don't have time to do that. I'll play 20. I may even hand do them or even use an optimizer. But if you're doing that, what is the advantage of utilizing the late swap?
Well, the first advantage is just you have more information at your disposal, not only on a player's health, but on what your opponents have done and how your lineup has done early on. So I think there's a lot of people who will just leave dead lineups out to be dead. And certainly you're not going to resurrect every dead lineup that's off to a really slow start. But for example, if you had somebody in the 4 o'clock games that was really expected to be highly owned, like let's say in week 1, you have David Johnson in a lineup that you're in a tournament, and every other person in the lineup has done really poorly. You're not catching up on the field by David Johnson doing well. You need something to happen to David Johnson that prevents him from doing really well in that game. You know, maybe an injury or maybe play calling where they just don't get the ball a lot. So you need to take chances to get away from David Johnson and pivot to somebody else that gives you the opportunity to make up the points you've already lost on the field by your underperforming lineup. So there's ways to kind of try to resurrect some lineups from the dead for GPPs, even to try to min cash, that gives yourself more equity over the long haul by consistently doing that. The most common thing that late swap is used for is simply checking on players that have questionable injury statuses and just making sure they're available. And if they're not, you can kind of move over to a player that is available. But I remember one year I was off to this terrible start. I believe I had one of my high-priced running backs get hurt early. I think it was like Le'Veon Bell. And I remember that Marshawn Lynch in the late game was a late scratch that week.
The Thomas Rawls game against Cincinnati. I did the same thing.
In that week, I believe also Spencer Ware was the starting running back, or Charkandrick West, one of the two for Kansas City because of a running back injury there. They were projected to be super chalky. My teams were dead. I thought they were completely dead. But I swapped all of my Spencer Ware or Charkandrick West, whichever one it was, to Thomas Rawls. Rawls had an unbelievable game. Ware or West, whichever KC running back it was, got hurt in the first quarter, and I resurrected all these dead lineups that were completely dead. It was a drawing dead $0, like sub 10% of my dollars coming back to me type week, and I ended up profitable. I ended up doubling up that week because Rawls went nuts and the other chalk failed, and it was a low scoring week on the whole. But there are times where you can save your week simply by moving away from chalk if you're off to a bad start. Or similarly, if you're off to a good start, some of those lineups, maybe you do move to a little bit more chalk and try to lock in a little bit of a higher profit.
I mean, you just want to give yourself outs. Like if you're drawing dead, it's a lot of people give up, but you want to do anything you can to, and over the course of the season too, like this example Drew mentioned, that's not going to happen every week. But if that happens 1 week of the season, that's a huge shift in your ROI on the entire season. The other thing too is when we were talking about mistakes people make, and how people aren't making as many egregious mistakes with all the information out there and whatnot nowadays. The one spot that people doesn't seem as widespread is late swap. So that Thomas Rawls week, he was really low owned in that main slate. Not that many people pivoted to him. So a lot of times what you see is people will fix their lineups if one of their guys is out, but they're not necessarily optimizing their lineup to account for, so if they have Lynch, they're going to replace Lynch and not play Lynch. If he gets scratched, they're going to put in Rawls. But they're not taking into account the fact that they can just make a better overall lineup. People aren't paying that type of attention. And it can be difficult on Sundays. I know you're doing things and whatnot. We have the lineup lords with Daily Roto, which helps a lot. You get an email paying Marshawn Lynch is inactive. This is the updated projection for Thomas Rawls. That helps a lot. But it just – there are so many things people are taking advantage of nowadays that makes the edge a little bit tougher. And this is one of the things that people aren't taking advantage of. So I think it becomes even more important when you look at it relative to the grand scheme of how people are playing.
All right, we're back with Rosalie Michaels and Matt Friedman of Action Network. You can catch Matt on the new Action Network app, available on iPhone and Android.
All right, time for you guys to give out some preseason grades, specifically A's, which I wasn't very used to growing up. But Rosalie, please tell us which quarterback you would give an A grade to.
There's a lot of quarterbacks out there that could use some aid, but the A, and I'm kind of surprised at who I went with here, because I was pre-preseason, I was fading him quite a bit, and it's Patrick Mahomes. He's been going against the first teams with a 72% completion percentage, a 103.5 passer rating, and I was fading him because I thought he'd be a little too run and gun and would make a lot of mistakes, but he actually looks pretty accurate, confident, and ready to take on this role. So you know what? You get an A from me, Mr. Patrick Mahomes.
All right, good for you, Patrick. How about you, Matt? Who you giving an A to, bud?
Yeah, I agree with Patrick Mahomes. Amazingly, I also think I feel disgusting saying this, that Nathan Peterman has basically done all that he can do to earn the starting job and earn an A. He's completed over 80% of his passes for 432 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Granted, a lot of that has come against inferior defense, but he's also playing with an inferior offense around him too. And you compare what he's done to what Josh Allen has done, who's basically looked like the guy he was in college when he completed 54% of his passes. That's what he's done in the preseason. I think if they being the Buffalo coaching staff, if they want to make this a legitimate competition, I think Nathan Peterman has won the competition. There's no question that Josh Allen long-term has the bigger upside, has more talent. But right now, Nathan Peterman has looked like the better quarterback. I think he's been one of the best quarterbacks all preseason, so I'm giving him an A.
All right, Matt, well, I hope this next answer doesn't make you sick, but which RB would get the grade from you?
So I was on the show a couple of months ago with Rosalie, and I remember her saying that she wasn't quite as high on Christian McCaffrey. And I'd like to know what she thinks now, because I think McCaffrey has been amazing in the preseason in a couple of ways. One, I think he's been used more than we thought he would. He's had great usage. He's basically been the primary back with the first team offense. And then he's been highly efficient running the ball, which he wasn't last year. And we all know about his receiving upside. So I think he's still someone that you can get in the second round who legitimately has first round potential as a producer. So based on what he's done in the preseason, easily I'm giving him an A.
Yeah, we've heard the coaches say they want to get him a lot of touches. So, Rosalie, which RB is going to get an A? And you got to answer, of course, about McCaffrey.
Yeah, Matthew is right. And I actually, when I came to this question, I really did have to decide between two people, and McCaffrey was one of them. And I actually ended up taking him as one of my running backs in one of my leagues. So I give McCaffrey the tip of the hat, and I hope that he scores me lots of points this year. But I'm going back to actually the other person that I did like when I sat at the beginning, right after the draft with Matthew. And I was really high on Royce Freeman, and I still am. I think Royce Freeman came into that situation where Devontae Booker was the thought of as going to be the early down back, and I think he's going to take over. I said it at the time, and it's looking like that now. 3 touchdowns in the preseason and averaging 5.6 yards per carries. Yeah, I like that a lot. And then, what I'm afraid of, people keep saying that Joseph hasn't decided who's going to be the lead back yet. And I say this to Joseph, if he doesn't start him as the lead back, it's going to be as much of a moment for me as it was when the Texans started Savage over Deshaun Watson last year for the first game. So Royce Freeman would be my pick and given the A.
All right, let's go to the wide receiver group. Who gets an A in your book, Rosalie?
Okay, so I feel like I'm talking about the Chiefs way more than I expected to
you
today.
appear to be a massive Chiefs fan.
Yeah.
I am not. I was really like, the new quarterback coming in, and I don't know. I thought they had a really good thing going last year with a lot of offense, and I was really unsure about Patrick Mahomes. But how can you not go Tyreek Hill? 14 for 14 for 182 yards and a touchdown. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that Mahomes-Hill connection this year, and it's going to be glorious.
Yeah, a lot of weapons for Mahomes out there. Hill, one of them. Matt, where are you going on this? Which wide receiver stood out to you? Who's getting the A, bud?
I like the Tyreek Hill call. I also like the Royce Freeman call. For me, at wide receiver, I'm going with a rookie, Traquan Smith, out of Central Florida, a third-rounder drafted by the Saints. And I think he's someone who's pretty under the radar, but there's a sneaky chance that he gets the number 2 job. By the end of the season, he could be the number 2 receiver for the Saints. Ted Ginn isn't really all that impressive at this point in his career. Cameron Meredith is still recovering from the ACL injury. Traquan Smith, 13 targets, which he's turned into an 11, 147, 1 receiving line. And one more thing, he has sort of this pedigree that's falling in with what Sean Payton and the Saints have historically really hit in a sweet spot of guys they've drafted at skill positions in the top 100 picks. Let me just run through this list really quickly.
Go ahead.
Reggie Bush, Robert Meacham, Jimmy Graham, Mark Ingram, Brandon Cooks, Michael Thomas, and Alvin Kamara. Every single one of those guys has had at least one fantasy relevant season. All of them except for Meacham, multiple fantasy relevant seasons. So at some point, Traquan Smith is going to be a guy who's a big contributor for that team. He's looked like it in the preseason. I'm just trying to get ahead of the curve now. So for me, he's getting an A.
Lots of smart, athletic human beings come out of
A lot of people getting A's
UCF.
right there.
I think I got one during my 5 years there.
Oh, man. All right. Well, before we let you guys go, give us your slate-approved picks for tonight's DK Classic contest. All 16 NFL teams will be in action. So, Matt, who are you going with?
I'm going with Tyler Bray, which it just seems so unbelievable to say that, but he's going to be starting apparently and playing for all 4 quarters. And so that's the name of the game, just having a quarterback out there who's going to be playing for the entire game, getting that opportunity. That's what you want in the 4th week of the preseason for DFS. So he's my guy.
Rosalie, who are you going with?
I like that pick as well, but I went with Chris Warren, the Oakland running back. You know what? I think, again, he's going to be playing the entire game, and that's what we're looking for tonight, right? The volume. And through 3 preseason games, he's had 13, 18, and 15 carries. He leads the league in rushing yards. That's weird, isn't it? But he's still playing for a spot on the roster. And so desperation for me says that he's going to do a lot tonight. So it's Chris Warren, the Oakland running back.
All right, thanks for the insight, NFL crew. We appreciate it. We'll be back in a flash here with our MLB panel, helping you figure out who to roster in Tears of Joy.
What's going on? I'm Brendan Glasheen with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. Per Ryan Divish of the Seattle Times, James Paxton on track to return from the DL to the Mariners rotation and start Saturday against the A's. Back on August 14th, Paxton was hit by a line drive, which led to a left forearm contusion, and it was a real shame. It's a shame to get hurt no matter what. But since the M's left, he was rolling prior to the bruising, an average of 21.7 DK fantasy points per start in 3 outings after the All-Star break. In the fantasy world, Saturday is a ways away. I get that. But just a heads up, don't be surprised if Paxton is one of the top-priced arms on the slate. After Garrett Cole and Patrick Corbin, Paxton, in my opinion, at the minimum, a top 5 pitcher of the Saturday projected starters. Now, I'm not saying he's going to dazzle. In fact, I think you're better off fading him. I just told you about Corbin and Garrett Cole. Those guys are great options. The salary of Paxton, just too high for a guy coming off a DL stint for the 2nd time in the last month.
All right, we've got one more go around with Garion and Greg peeping Tears of Joy now.
Looking at the best options from the different tiers of DK's Tiers contest for tonight. So, Garion, who are you taking in Tier 2?
I think you have to take Mike Trout. I mean, he's Mike Trout. That's kind of what this is at the end of the day. We already talked about the woes that Justin Verlander has had since July 15th. But to recap, 372 WOBA to the opposition, and none of those people were Mike Trout. Well, actually, one was, but just once. I just think that Trout on this tier, people are going to be drawn towards those Boston bats again, and that's fine, especially for guys like Benintendi, who are higher caliber than like Jackie Bradley Jr., but considering how well Trout has hit anyone this season, and even if you want to play the BVP game, he's 4 for 32 against Verlander, sure, but half of those 4 hits are home runs, because again, he's Mike Trout.
All right, Greg, who are you taking in Tier 2?
Yeah, I'm going to go in another direction here, and Trout is definitely the best player of anybody in this tier because he's the best player in baseball. So it's kind of ridiculous to see him not in tier 1. But with that said, a matchup against Verlander is still much more difficult than some of the other pitching matchups we're seeing from guys in this tier. So I'm actually looking at Acuna in tier 2. He's had an unbelievable rookie season. He has 21 home runs, somehow like 40 of them been leadoff or something like that. He seems to start every single game with a long ball. Nothing has been able to stop him other than a pitcher throwing at him. He's going up against Mike Montgomery, who's been not great left-handed pitcher this year, and he hasn't started since August 7th, so there could be some rust there. I think this is a good spot for Acuna, and I think we could see him hit another leadoff homer here.
Greg, tier 4, Xander, Stanton, Altuve. I mean, just to name a few here. Who are you going to roster?
Well, one thing I just have to point out, something that's bugging me because of what an idiot I am. When I set up, I thought that it would look nice if I did this. Oh, I'll do it next to a window. There'll be some like natural lighting in my room. But anybody who's a science major would know that I started doing this show at 6 o'clock my time. So as we get later into the show, it slowly gets darker. So each segment we do, my room gets darker and darker. And if this show went like half an hour longer, I would just be like a raccoon in a cartoon.
No,
with
it's
the
okay.
Yeah, you looked pretty angelic before. Now it's kind of like the lights dimming, but that's okay.
Yeah, it's like a nice romantic dinner with Garion.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not so bad then. I'll take it back. It was well planned then. So for this tier, I'm going with Tyler White again. We talked about him earlier. I know Garion said to fade him, but Tyler White, I think he's a really good play here. He's been hitting a lot of home runs lately. As I said earlier, 142 WRC plus against left-handed pitching. And I think if you roster him, you might as well just pencil him in for the 14 DK points. He's getting a home run tonight. I think that's a guarantee, especially because Garion's fading him.
Garion, who you like in this tier?
I mean, I think you do have to pick from one of the 3 Astros. I would agree with that, but I'm not going with Tyler White for reasons we already discussed. And then if it's between George Springer and Jose Altuve, I think you just have to go with the guy who has more upside. And it's weird when you talk about a former American League MVP not having the most upside, but George Springer just has that power. He has the ability to hit home runs, and Altuve's isolated power has been pretty meager this season against left-handed pitching, where Springer consistently has crushed lefties throughout his career, 138 WRC plus in a down year in 2018. So yeah, give me George Springer.
And down in tier 6, players who are averaging, 9-7 fantasy points per game. Who's your guy, Garion?
There's a lot of guys in this tier who just aren't in the lineup, so it's kind of an interesting tier. Let's go back to the Astros, though. For me, this comes down to Correa versus Daniel Palka, and I'm just going to take Carlos Correa. I know the numbers against Southpaws haven't been great this season, but if you look a little bit deeper than just the raw home run totals, he's got a 36% line drive rate off of left-handed pitching this season. It's just that his home run to fly ball ratio is like 5.6%, so I think Correa is in a nice little spot here.
Greg, not a lot of options. Who are you going with?
Yeah, back to me from prison. I'm going to also go with Carlos Correa. I just think he's a better player than the other guys in this tier, and he has hit lefties still reasonably well this year, overall 137 WRC plus for the season. And the Astros offense has kind of been banged up the entire season. We're seeing them all healthy for the first time all year. So not only do I think Carlos Correa is a good play from this tier, but also I'm going to say that I think that the Astros as a whole are pretty good under the radar stack on the slate as a whole.
All right, guys, need your slate approved selections for this evening. Your lock of tonight's 8-game slate. Greg?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Giancarlo Stanton going up against the lefty in Francisco Liriano at home Yankee Stadium. Gary and I said earlier that we thought the Yankees are the top stack on the slate, the most obvious play. So why not Stanton, who kills left-handed pitching?
Garion, have at it.
Yeah, I was trying to decide between Stanton and Hicks, so let's go with Hicks because he went with Stanton. I think Hicks is someone who has historically always hit better as a right-handed hitter. Great environment tonight, great spot tonight against Francisco Liriano. Yeah, stack those Yankees.
All right, thanks, guys. We appreciate the time. We'll talk to you later. Maybe not to Greg, who is in prison, I guess, but have a good night.
Night, guys.
All right, so did we learn anything today?
Yeah, it was
Emerson.
It was in the past 2 minutes. Greg does this show from prison. I'm shocked that they give him a
Wi-Fi.
computer.
Yeah, pretty shocked there. I learned that Matt Friedman does not forget. He has been waiting to tell Rosalie what he thinks of Christian McCaffrey, and he was like, my moment. I'm ready.
Your time to shine.
Yeah.
Every night here on The Sweat, 6 o'clock Eastern Time.
Yeah, that is correct. So, yeah, do you want to try that? Do you want to try the outro?
What do you mean?
Like, I'm Emerson Lotzia. She's Jessie Coffield. Do you want to try it?
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Well, that's our show tonight, folks. Thanks so much. I'm Jessie Coffield. She's Emerson Lotzia. Have a great night.